I'm reading this morning from Genesis chapter 2 and verse 18. Genesis chapter 2 and verse 18. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him." And so out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the sky and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called a living creature, that was its name. And the man gave names to all the cattle and to the birds of the sky and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper suitable for him. The message that I want to offer for us this morning is a very simple one that's derived from this text. And the message is this: God knows. God knows. And there's such comfort in knowing that God knows. And as we begin a new year, and as we think about charting our course this year, and contemplating all the things that we're going to do, whatever our ambitions are work-wise, whatever our ambitions are for our family, whatever plans and dreams that you have and working out this year, whatever obstacles you want to overcome this year, the message I want you to think about as we begin this year together is that God knows. God knows. I want you to see how God taught Adam that on the very first day that man breathed air. The very first day that man lived. God was teaching Adam from the outset that he knows. Man didn't know. Adam didn't know that he was lonely. Isn't that something? Not yet. He didn't know that there was something missing. And so God had to teach Adam the thing that he didn't know that he knew. And so God says to himself, it's not good for man to be alone. He already knows the outcome of the educational process that he's about to take man through. He knows that it's not good. And so he brings this parade of creatures before man. All of them are nameless. And so a dog is not yet a dog, and a cat's not yet a cat, and a lion's not yet a lion, and a bear's not yet a bear, and a pig's not yet a pig, and a bird's not yet... Nothing has a name. God has been waiting for man to give names to things. And so he brings this parade of all of these animals before man, and man starts coming up with names. That looks like a pig. That looks like a fish. That looks like a... And he starts giving names to things. But in the experience of giving names to things, man learns not just what God has created, he's learned what God has not created. He's learned that something is missing. He discovers this need that he has. This need that now he knows and that God already knew. Now, I believe that God is doing that with us all the time. I believe that God knows what you need right now. Do you believe that? I believe that He knows for all of us. I believe He knows what we really need. And I believe part of what He's doing with us is what He was doing with Adam on that first day. He is confronting us all the time with emptiness. He's confronting us all the time with these holes that He's put in us. He poked a hole in Adam and He took out a rib. And then He brought to him the one who can fill the hole in his side. He brings to him woman. But the thing that he needs to discover in that is not just that the woman fills this emptiness that God has poked in his side, but that God is the one who ultimately fills that. He's the one that can fill all of man's needs. And in this case, what man needed was woman. What he needed was help. And so God created help for him in the creation of woman. There are going to be holes that God pokes in you this year. There are going to be needs that you have that He touches. There is going to be, He's going to let you experience some emptiness and some void. And the thing that is comforting to me and all of that contemplation is that He knows. He knows what I need. And He is showing me what I need. And He's showing me what I need so that I will come back to Him to be filled with the thing that I need. And to know that He's the one that can do that. To know that He knows. And to know that He knows before I knew. And to know that He knows before I knew that He knew. God is that much ahead of me all the time, all the while. Isn't that a comfort? God knows the things that you really, really need. That's not all that He knows. Look, if you would, at Genesis chapter 4. Genesis chapter 4, and read with me beginning in verse 4 of Genesis chapter 4. It says, "And Abel on his part also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of their fat portions, and the Lord had regard for Abel and for his offering." Verse 5, "But for Cain and for his offering, God had no regard. So Cain became very angry, and his countenance fell. And so the Lord said to Cain, 'Why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must master it.'" One of the things that's a comfort for me to know about God is that God knows the things that are wrong with my heart. God knows the things that are wrong with my heart. God knows the things that are wrong with your heart. Do you know that? He knows what's missing. He knows what needs fixing. He knows what is corrupt. He knows where it's flawed. And He shows Cain here that He knows what's going on inside of Cain. It's written on his face. It's on his countenance. And God knows what's behind his countenance. Why is he crestfallen? Why is he sad? Why is he angry? Why isn't he smiling? God knows the answer to all of that. And He is confronting Cain with the fact that He knows what's wrong with his heart. Because Cain needs to see that. Now, Cain, for his part, has not figured out what's really going on here. Instead, Cain is, he's not seeing that when he fails to give God his best, this is what happens. Abel gave God his best, but Cain, he didn't. He brought God something less than his best. And you see that God, in confronting him with that opportunity, the opportunity to worship Him, the opportunity to bring Him His best, by confronting him, by giving him that kind of opportunity, God exposed something that was wrong with Cain's heart. Do you see that? He gave him the opportunity to come and bow before Him and worship and lift up to Him His best, and he didn't do that. And Cain doesn't deal well with that being exposed, with the light being shed on that, especially when he sees how God accepted what Abel offered but hasn't accepted his gift. He doesn't do well with being shown up by his little brother. Something wrong with his heart in that. And so when he's shown up by his little brother, he gets angry about that, and God confronts him about that. But he doesn't deal well with confrontation, does he? God confronts him about his sin, and Cain blames his brother for his wrong. He sees himself as being a victim here, and if Abel is out of the way, then everything's going to be good for Cain. If Abel's gone, his problem is his little brother. It's not his sin, it's not his heart. But God confronts him with that. And then God tells him, sin is crouching at the door of your heart, of the door of your life. And its desire is for you, but you must master it. You, Cain, you are a creature of choice. And you have decisions that you can make. Cain, he doesn't want to be responsible for his choices. He doesn't want to listen to the burden that God puts on him. He is angry, and all he wants to do is pour out his anger on his brother, and so he kills his brother. I believe that one of the things God's doing with us all the time is He is confronting us with the things that we need to fix in our heart. Do you look at the burdens in your life that way? What is it God's teaching me in this? Is the reason why this kind of situation keeps coming up, and I keep experiencing this kind of problem with people? I keep coming to this same mountain in my life. I keep coming to this same crossroad over and over again. Do you think it's possible that why that happens is because God is confronting us with the things in our heart that need work, with the things in our life that we need to make choices about, with the things in our life that we need to figure out. We need to figure this out. We need to figure out what's God's way here. He was doing that with Cain. Because God knew the things that need fixing in Cain's heart. I believe that God knows the things that need fixing in my heart. And He is confronting me with things all of the time to shape me into someone better. The thing I admire about how God treats Cain is that God is gracious with him. Do you see that in the story? What does Cain deserve? Cain deserves to die, doesn't he? He killed his brother. He deserves to die, but God doesn't kill Cain. God does punish him, but what He does with Cain is not all punitive, it is rehabilitative. God curses Cain so that he's more separated from the earth even than his father was. And part of what He wants Cain to learn in the process of being a vagrant and a wanderer and the ground not producing for him anymore, even though his great gift was that he was a tiller of the earth, he's not going to experience the fruitfulness of the ground anymore. The reason why God lets him experience all of that is so that he can discover the things that need changing in his heart. God is trying to groom him and bring him back, and I believe God's doing that with all of us. God knows the things that are wrong with our hearts. Number 3, God knows the things that matter most to us. Go, if you will, to chapter 4 and verse 17 of Genesis. Genesis chapter 4 and verse 17. And it says that this is concerning Cain again, that Cain had relations with his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to Enoch. And he built a city, and he called the name of the city Enoch after the name of his son. One of the things that's impressive to me in Genesis chapter 4 is how Cain fathered a whole family of great achievers. I mean, Cain's descendants did great things. Do you know that Cain was the first person to build an empire, the first person to build a city? And he named the city after his firstborn son, Enoch. And later on, if you go down to verse 20 through 22, it says about a later descendant of his, Lamech, that Lamech had 2 wives, one that was named Ada, and it says in verse 20, Ada gave birth to Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. And his brother's name was Jubal, and he was the father of all those who play the lyre and the pipe. Jabal and Jubal. Sounds like Mayberry, doesn't it? Jabal and Jubal. And then in verse 22 it says, and as for Zillah, she also gave birth to Tubal-Cain, the forger of all implements of bronze and iron, and the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And so here are these 3 boys that are the sons of Lamech and that are the descendants of Cain. One is the father of those that do husbandry. They know about livestock and they know about dwelling in tents. And the other is the father of music, of making jubilation. Jubal is the father of music. And the other one is the father of those that forge implements of iron, those that are smiths. Jabal is the father of those. And so Cain is the father of the builder of cities, the father of musicians. He's the father of those that build tools. He's the father. He is the father of those that are involved with livestock. He fathered all of those. Cain's impressive, is he not? I mean, his family is the who's who of the ancient world before the flood. Look at verse 25. Adam had relations with his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth, for she said, God has appointed me another offspring in the place of Abel, for Cain killed him. And to Seth, to him also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. And what did Enosh accomplish? Then men began to call upon the name of the Lord. When you read Seth's line in chapter 5, it's really pretty boring in terms of like achievements. There's no musicians. There's nobody that created tools. There's nobody that built cities that's talked about in Genesis chapter 5. The only thing noteworthy that the line of Seth did was call upon the name of the Lord. That was it. That was their achievement. And out of Seth's line came a man like Enoch that walked with God, and he was not, because God took him. And out of Seth's line was a man like Methuselah, who lived 969 years. And out of Seth's line was a man named Noah, who didn't build a city, who didn't build tools, who didn't build musical instruments. The only thing he did was build a boat, and a really big one, and one that God used to save the world. It's all that Seth's line did. It's all they did. But it wasn't Noah's idea. It wasn't his design. God gave him the blueprints. God gave him the instructions. Now, I want you to see that in all of that, God knows, and He is finding out in our lives. He's finding out what matters most to us. He's finding out what we really care about. And so, which legacy do you want to leave in your kids? I mean, what do you, in 500 years, in 1,000 years, do you want to be the father and the mother of a line of city builders, of great musicians, of people that made great technologies that changed the world, the way people farm? People who are great manipulators of genes and of plants, that have great skills in husbandry, things that change people's health, that change people's diets. What if you could just raise a family that calls on the name of the Lord? Just have a son and a daughter, children that grow up, and all they do, the only great accomplishment in their life is that they love God. God knows what you really want. He knows what matters most to you. And we are all the time showing Him what our priorities are, the choices that matter most to us. He sees that in us. He knows what matters most to us. Look, if you would, at Genesis chapter 6 and verse 5. Genesis chapter 6 and verse 5. It says, And then the Lord saw the wickedness of man, that it was great on the earth, and every thought of the intents of his heart was only evil continually. Verse 8. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. One of the things that God knows about you, and that is very comforting to me, is that God knows what's going on in our world. Noah was lonely in his world because there weren't people that loved God the way he did. Not only was Cain's line doing ambitious and doing great things, but things that left God out of their lives, but even his own family was doing the same thing. I mean, even his own brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts, and they're all forgetting God. And so Noah is alone in his generation. He's not sinless, But he finds favor with God. God sees that Noah is trying and that he's righteous in his generation. And God knows what's going on in Noah's world. God knows what's going on in our government. God knows what's going on in our country. God knows about ISIS. God knows about terrorists. God knows where people are hiding. God knows what people are doing. God knows what people are plotting. He knows what they're planning, does He not? He knows what's happening in your workplace. He knows what's going on in your home. He knows what's happening in your family. He knows what it's like in your neighborhood. He knows what your enemies are doing. He knows what they're saying. He knows if you're being mocked. He knows if people are calling you foolish. He knows if people are saying, "What do you do? What are you building in your backyard? What is that?" He knows when people won't hear, when you say, "Look, judgment is coming." And your neighbors say, like they must have about Noah, Noah thinks he's the only one that's going to heaven. Noah, my God, Noah, would not destroy the world. My God is a loving God. He knows the way that people would malign God to Noah. He knows how truth gets twisted in our time. God knows what's happening in your world. I'm comforted by that, by God knowing what's going on in my world. Chapter 6 and verse 14. God says to Noah, "Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. You shall make the ark with rooms, and you shall cover it inside and out with pitch. And this is how you shall make it." And he goes on to give the length and the width and the height of it. Could I say to you, and this is so comforting to me to know, God knows the way. He knows the way. He knows the way out. He knows the way through. He knows the way to fix. Noah doesn't know. It may be that Noah doesn't even know what rain is. He certainly doesn't know rain in the scale that God is talking about. He doesn't know what floods are. He doesn't know what His judgment is going to be like. God knows. God knows. And even if Noah knew that it was all coming to an end, Noah didn't know the way, but God knows the way. And He shows Noah the way so that Noah can know the way. And He knows the way in all of these areas that we've talked about. God knows the way to fulfill our needs. So He teaches Adam, "Woman, I need her." Thank you, God, for knowing what I need and filling my need. God knows how to fix our hearts. He knows what to fix in our hearts. And so He's confronting us with that so that we'll see, I need to give God my best. I need to stop blaming my brother for what's wrong with me, for the fact that I'm not giving him my best. I need to start listening to God when He tells me that if you keep going on this path, you're going to get in big trouble because there is sin right outside the door. And so if you go through this door, it's going to master you. Close the door. God knows the way to fix my heart. God knows the way to focus our priorities. God knows the way to focus our priorities. And so He is always in the book of Genesis trying to teach people what matters most. So you built a city. Whoosh. So you made great music and you made great tools and all of that. It doesn't matter. Who's left in the end are the people that love God. Who's left are the people that are in His boat. Who's left are the people that call upon His name. Who's left are those that walk with God. Those are the people. He's teaching us all the while. He's focusing our priorities. God knows the way to do that. He is good at that. He's good at helping us refocus. And God knows the way to restore our world. He knows the way to restore our world. Things are broken in Noah's time. The world is not the way that it's supposed to be. And so God makes a new world for Noah. He takes away the old world, and he creates a new world that Noah becomes the heir of. The world in Noah's day is washed clean. God washes away the sin of his times. God washes away the wickedness of his day. God cleanses the earth of corruption. And Noah inherits a brand new world that is pristine. A brand new world that is free of sin. A brand new beginning. God knows the way to new beginnings. He knows the way to revive. He knows the way to resurrect. He knows the way to renew. He knows the way to restore. Isn't that comforting? God knows. He knows your needs. He knows your priorities. He knows the things that you need fixing. God knows your world. And He knows what you need to make all those things right. Isn't that a reason to come to Him? Today's a good day for a new beginning. So let's begin again, shall we? Let's begin anew. Let's give our lives, let's submit our hearts, yield our obedience to the one that knows. If you have a need for God in your life this morning, won't you come as together we stand as we sing?